My name's Jane Kilcher, and I'm working with Emily Rydell on her dredge up in Nome. I love being on the dredge, and we're getting gold. I definitely have gold fever. People probably know me best from Alaska Last
A
Frontier.
love story from the wilds of Alaska. Jane Kilcher and Atz Lee Kilcher were once seen as one of the strongest couples on reality TV. Fans of the Discovery Channel's hit show Alaska, The Last Frontier, watched them survive harsh winters, live off the land, and face challenges that most people can't even imagine. Their love seemed unshakable. They came from the same small town in Alaska, and although they lived separate lives for a time, fate brought them back together. Jane had worked as a nurse before joining Atz Lee in homesteading. He was born into the Kilcher family, who had been living off the land for generations. Their bond looked strong, their teamwork was inspiring, and their ability to handle Alaska's wild environment amazed viewers. But what fans didn't know was that under the surface, things were changing, and not for the better. The making of a reality show Family when Alaska, The Last Frontier first aired in 2011. It quickly captured the attention of millions. The show followed the daily life of the Kilcher family as they lived on over 600 acres of land in Homer, Alaska. Unlike many reality shows, this one wasn't about fame or drama. It was about survival, hard work, and family. Jane joined the show later, but when she did, she quickly became a fan favorite. Her honesty, humor, and strength stood out. She was not afraid of getting dirty, working hard, or speaking her mind. Atz Lee was more reserved, but skilled in surviving the harsh land. Together, they balanced each other. Viewers loved their connection and the way they worked as a team. Behind the scenes, however, their journey wasn't as smooth as it looked on screen. Trouble behind the scenes. As the years passed, fans began to notice that something felt different. Jane continued to appear strong and cheerful on camera, but there were signs that things were not the same between her and Atz Lee. The change wasn't sudden, it happened slowly. One of the major turning points was Atz Lee's serious accident in 2015. While hiking near Otter Cove, he fell off a 40-foot cliff and suffered many injuries, including broken ribs, a shattered arm, a fractured hip, and punctured lungs. He had to be flown to the hospital by helicopter and faced a long, painful recovery. During that time, Jane stepped up in a big way. She took care of him, managed the homestead, and continued to raise their children. Even while filming the show, she made sure her family stayed together. But something inside Atz Lee had changed, and that shift began to affect everything. The long road to healing after the accident, Atz Lee was no longer the same. The physical injuries healed over time, but emotionally, he seemed distant. He began to pull away from Jane, from his children, and even from the show. He started spending more time in the woods, working on a cabin far from their main homestead. He said it gave him peace and helped him feel grounded. But Jane felt the space growing between them. She tried to support him, to understand what he was going through. She continued to hold the family together, cooking, fishing, filming, and raising their daughter, Piper. All the while, she was doing it mostly alone. Atz Lee would return for short visits, but then leave again. It wasn't just physical distance, it was emotional. He was disconnecting from the life they had built together. Protecting the children from the spotlight. One thing that always stood out about Jane was how fiercely she protected their children. Both Jane and Atz Lee had kids from previous relationships. Jane's daughter, Piper, and Atz Lee's son, Eddie, were rarely seen on the show. That was a choice Jane made early on. She didn't want her children exposed to the harsh comments and pressure that come with being in the public eye. While she filmed long hours and did tough homestead work, she made sure her kids had a normal life behind the scenes. This decision showed her deep love and wisdom. Many fans respected her even more for that. But as the years went on, her relationship with Atz Lee began to feel less like a partnership and more like a solo mission. She was fighting to keep things going while he seemed to be drifting farther away. Signs of change began to show. Viewers began to notice the change too. Atz Lee appeared less often on the show, and when he didn't seem fully present. Jane stopped posting about him online. Instead, she focused on her fishing trips, the beauty of Alaska, and her love for her daughter. The warm posts she used to share about her husband disappeared. Fans began asking questions, wondering what had happened. Jane kept her answers kind and short. She didn't bash Atz Lee or share too much, but her silence said a lot. She was clearly going through something difficult, but she kept showing up for the cameras, for her daughter, and for herself. That kind of quiet strength made her even more admired by fans. a marriage quietly breaking down behind the scenes. It became clear that Jane and Atz Lee's marriage was struggling. They were still living in the same place and filming the same show, but emotionally, they were on different paths. Jane was focused on family, connection, and working as a team. Atz Lee, on the other hand, seemed more interested in building a life alone. He spent long stretches of time away, working on solo projects in the woods. Even though they tried to work things out through therapy and long conversations, their goals no longer matched. Jane wanted to hold the family together, but Atz Lee wanted distance. Over time, Jane began to feel exhausted not just from the physical work, but from carrying the emotional burden alone. Jane finally breaks her silence after years of silence and speculation. Jane Kilcher finally confirmed what many fans had suspected. In a quiet but emotional message, she admitted that things between her and Atz Lee were no longer the same. She didn't go into every detail, but what she did say made it clear the rumors were true. The marriage that once seemed so strong had reached its breaking point. Jane had tried to keep things private for the sake of their family and to protect their children, but the weight of it had grown too heavy to keep hiding. Her honesty touched many people. Fans flooded her with support, thanking her for being so brave and wishing her well. For Jane, speaking the truth was not just about the end of a marriage, it was about taking her life back. A new chapter begins now. Jane is starting a new chapter. She's still in Alaska, still strong, and still doing what she loves. She's fishing, spending time in nature, and raising her daughter with the same love and protection she always has. Her journey hasn't been easy, but she's facing it with grace and courage. Atz Lee continues to live his life in his own way, spending time off the grid and away from the spotlight. They may not be the couple they once were, but they both continue to move forward. Jane's story is a reminder that even strong people can reach a breaking point, and when they do, it's okay to speak up, make a change, and choose a path that brings peace. Conclusion: from reality TV to real life on the end. Jane Kilcher's story is not just about fame or television, it's about real life, love, pain, and strength. Her marriage to Atz Lee may have looked perfect on screen, but behind the scenes, it was filled with challenges that many couples face. Jane's choice to finally speak up took courage, especially in the public eye. She showed that it's okay to protect your peace, to walk away when things no longer work, and to do what's right for yourself and your family. Her fans continue to support her, not just because she was a reality star, but because she's a real woman with a real story. And in the world of reality TV, that kind of honesty is rare and powerful. The truth behind the Kilcher marriage for many years. Jane Kilcher and Atz Lee Kilcher seemed like the perfect couple on TV. They lived on the homestead in Alaska, worked together in the wilderness, and showed a strong bond in front of the camera. But things are not always what they seem. Behind the smiles and the hard work, something was changing between them, slowly and quietly. The energy in their marriage began to shift. It wasn't one big fight or dramatic moment that caused it. Instead, it was the small things, the long silences, the growing distance, and the lack of honest communication. These things can break a relationship over time. Jane had given up a lot to live on the homestead with Atz Lee. She left behind her old life as a nurse and chose this rugged lifestyle for love and family. But somewhere along the way, she realized she was living that dream mostly by herself. Jane kept trying. She worked hard every day, not just for herself, but for the family and the life they had built. She hoped things would get better, that they could reconnect, and that the love would return. But as the months passed, Atz Lee seemed more and more distant. The emotional connection between them started to fade. Jane stayed because she cared deeply and believed in the promise they had made to each other. She believed in the value of family, hard work, and commitment. But Atz Lee was no longer present in the same way. He had pulled away emotionally and sometimes even physically, disappearing into the wilderness for long stretches. The homestead began to feel more like a place of duty than of joy. What fans saw on TV was only part of the story. Behind the scenes, Jane was struggling to keep everything together while Atz Lee continued to drift. A quiet breaking point when a marriage ends. It's not always with a loud argument or a dramatic goodbye. Sometimes the end comes quietly for Jane and Atz Lee Kilcher. The breaking point was slow and painful. They had been trying for years to hold things together. They smiled for the cameras, showed up for the family, and kept working side by side. But anyone paying close attention could see the difference. Jane was appearing more and more alone in scenes. Atz Lee seemed distant, sometimes barely present. The connection they once had started to feel more like a routine than a partnership. The love that had once brought them together now seemed buried beneath years of unspoken pain and quiet disappointment. Jane didn't give up easily. She kept showing up, managing the homestead, caring for the animals, and raising her daughter Piper. She did it all with grace and strength, hoping that Atz Lee would eventually come back not just physically, but emotionally. Meanwhile, Atz Lee became more isolated. He would retreat into the woods for days or even weeks, seeking peace in nature rather than working through the struggles at home. Jane often had to handle the responsibilities of the homestead on her own, even though it was meant to be a shared life. Over time, the emotional gap between them became too wide to ignore. They were no longer a team. They were the people living under the same roof, but in very different worlds. Friends and fans started to notice when asked about the situation. Jane kept quiet for a long time, but in 2023, she finally said something that confirmed what many had suspected for years. The final confirmation in 2023, Jane Kilcher spoke publicly about her marriage in a way she never had before. While she didn't go into great detail, her words confirmed what many fans had already guessed: her relationship with Atz Lee was no longer what it used to be. This quiet confirmation was not surprising to those who had followed the couple closely. Over time, Jane had started to appear more confident and independent, while Atz Lee seemed to fade more into the background. The couple that once faced the harsh realities of Alaska together was now living two very separate lives. The emotional distance between them had grown so large that there was no longer a way to hide it, even from viewers at home. Jane's decision to finally speak about the relationship took courage. She had spent years protecting her family's privacy, choosing silence over drama. But sometimes, silence can become a burden. It can make people feel alone, even when surrounded by others. Jane's words didn't come with blame or anger. Instead, they showed acceptance. She had done everything she could to make the relationship work, and now she was ready to be honest with herself, her family, and the world. This honesty allowed her to begin healing, and moving forward, it also helped fans understand her story more deeply. Her strength came not just from her ability to survive the wilderness, but from her courage to face emotional challenges head-on. Her quiet truth was more powerful than any loud argument or dramatic scene could ever be. Life after Atz Lee, confirming the end of her relationship with Atz Lee, Jane began to focus more on herself and her daughter Piper. She continued to live on the homestead and take care of her responsibilities. But there was a new kind of peace in her presence. Free from the stress of trying to fix a relationship that wasn't working, Jane was able to turn her attention to personal growth and family bonds that still mattered deeply to her. She didn't leave the land or the lifestyle she had committed to. Instead, she found new strength within it. Her love for nature, animals, and the way of life in Alaska remained as strong as ever. The difference now was that she was no longer trying to carry the emotional weight of someone who had already checked out. Fans noticed the change. Jane seemed more relaxed and confident. She shared more personal moments on social media and opened up about her journey. While the divorce or separation was never made into a spectacle, her quiet transformation told the story. It showed that, even in difficult times, it's possible to find peace. Life after Atz Lee wasn't about escaping the past, it was about embracing the future. Jane didn't pretend that everything was perfect, but she did show that healing is possible. She became an example of how to move on from a broken relationship without losing yourself. Her story resonated with many people who had experienced similar struggles in their own lives. Her honesty and strength inspired others to keep going, even when life doesn't go as planned. What really went wrong? When people think about failed relationships, they often imagine big betrayals or explosive arguments. But sometimes relationships end simply because the people grow apart. In Jane and Atz Lee's case, the biggest issue seemed to be emotional distance. Atz Lee had a habit of pulling away, retreating into nature, and avoiding hard conversations. Jane, on the other hand, wanted to work through the problems. She stayed present and tried to keep the family strong. This difference in how they handled conflict and change eventually drove a wedge between them. Jane needed a partner who would show up, talk openly, and work as a team. Atz Lee needed space, quiet, and time alone. Their needs no longer matched. There were also pressures from living in the public eye. Being on a reality show meant that their relationship was always being watched, even when things were tough. While they did their best to keep their private struggles hidden, the cracks began to show. Fans saw the change in their interactions, and rumors started to spread. Jane avoided drama and refused to fan the flames. But she couldn't stop people from noticing that something was wrong. Eventually, she realized that protecting the image of a perfect marriage wasn't worth sacrificing her own well-being. What really went wrong was not one big event, it was a slow, steady breakdown of connection, understanding, and support, and once that connection was gone, it was almost impossible to rebuild. A new chapter for Jana that the truth is out, and Jane has confirmed what many suspected. She is entering a new chapter of her life. She is no longer living in the shadow of a strained relationship. She is standing on her own. Stronger and wiser than before, Jane continues to share her journey with fans, offering a message of resilience and hope. She has found peace in her surroundings and strength in her independence. Her story is not just about heartbreak, it's about healing. It's about letting go of something that no longer serves you and choosing to move forward with grace. While the end of her relationship with Atz Lee was sad, it was also freeing. Jane is no longer holding on to the past. She is building a future based on her values, her dreams, and her truth. Fans continue to support her, not just because they enjoyed watching her on TV, but because they respect her honesty. She reminds people that it's okay to admit when something isn't working. It's okay to choose yourself. Jane Kilcher's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something you once loved, not out of anger, but out of the deep understanding that you deserve peace and happiness. And that's a lesson that will resonate far beyond the Homestead. Jane Kilcher's brave truth. What really happened with Atz Lee? When Jane Kilcher finally spoke up about her divorce from Atz Lee Kilcher, many fans were surprised. For a long time, people had been guessing about what was going on between them. Some rumors were true, and others were just wild guesses. But when Jane opened up, she did it in her own quiet, strong way. She made a post on her social media saying, "Here we go. Atz Lee is divorcing me, and it is very unfortunate, but I cannot control it. Lost my best friend, and it hurts, but I guess that is life." These words were short and simple, but they were full of pain and sadness. It wasn't just a breakup. It was the end of something she had deeply believed in. Jane wasn't someone who wanted to share everything online, but in that moment, she let people see her pain. What made it even more heartbreaking was how calm and respectful she was. There was no anger in her post, just sadness. Even when people criticized her or made rude comments online, Jane stood her ground with dignity. She defended her family and told people not to drag her children into the spotlight. In one Facebook post, she even addressed a black eye that fans had noticed. She explained that it happened on TV during filming and wasn't related to any drama. She said, "Leave my kids alone. Come after me if you want." That kind of bravery is rare, especially when you're hurting. Even during one of the hardest times in her life, Jane showed grace, strength, and a deep love for her family. The end of a love story built in the wild. Jane and Atz Lee were not just any couple. They were the people who shared a life far away from the modern world, deep in the wilds of Alaska. Their story was shown to millions through the popular reality show Alaska, The Last Frontier. Fans watched them work together, survive the cold winters, and raise a blended family in one of the toughest places on Earth. That made their breakup even more painful to watch. Many fans felt like they had lost something too. Their marriage symbolized strength, teamwork, and love in the face of hardship. But behind the scenes, things had been falling apart for a while. Jane never made a big deal out of it. She didn't go on interviews or talk about it too much. She quietly stepped away from the spotlight. She focused on her daughter, Piper, and on her own healing. She didn't want to make the divorce into a show. Instead, she chose to move forward with quiet courage. Over time, her social media changed. The happy family pictures were replaced with images of Jane out fishing, running boat tours, and reconnecting with what she loved. She found comfort in the ocean, the fish, and the simple life. Even then, she never said a bad word about Atz Lee. In fact, she often told her fans not to attack him. That showed how much she still cared even if they were no longer together. Jane had held on as long as she could, hoping things would work out. But when she realized it was time to let go, she did it with grace and without drama. Her strength inspired many who have gone through similar heartbreaks, life after divorce, quiet healing, stronger spirit after the divorce. Jane could have disappeared from public life. She could have deleted her social media and chosen to live in peace without anyone watching. Well, she didn't do that. Instead, she took some quiet time for herself, and then she slowly began sharing her journey. At first, she didn't post much. She needed space. She spent time near the ocean, fishing and reflecting. She focused on her daughter Piper, who had always been her top priority. Piper wasn't involved in the reality show anymore, and Jane made it clear she wanted to protect her daughter's privacy as Jane started to return. She did it in small steps. Her posts were no longer about her marriage or the pain she felt. Instead, they were about finding joy again, fishing trips, funny thoughts, pictures of her smiling after a long day on the boat. Slowly, the sparkle returned to her eyes. Jane had always been funny and real. Her dry humor came back, so did her strength, but this time, it was different. She had peace. For years, Jane had given everything to her family, her marriage, and the show. Now, for the first time, she was thinking about herself. In one post, she joked, "I don't need a man. I just need fish, peace, and a few close people who get me." It was funny, but it was also true. Jane had always told it like it was, and now she was being honest about what she needed. She reconnected with the strong, independent woman she had always been, not just a homesteader's wife, but a nurse, a mother, a friend, and a fierce Alaskan woman who could face freezing waters and still smile. A mother's love and a new family dynamic. Jane's bond with her daughter Piper grew stronger after the divorce. Jane had always been a protective and loving mother, but now, their relationship deepened in a new way. They spent more time together, going outdoors, cooking, and simply talking. Piper stayed out of the spotlight, but Jane would sometimes share sweet behind-the-scenes moments that showed just how proud she was of her daughter. Piper is now pursuing a degree in business administration at Western Washington University and is expected to graduate in 2026. She lives a quiet college life, away from fame, enjoying activities like swimming with the Kachamak Swim Club. Jane respects Piper's choice to stay private, but can't help showing her pride in small ways. Jane's love didn't stop at Piper. She also continued to show care for Etienne, Atz Lee's son from a previous relationship, even after the divorce. She stayed in touch and treated him like her own. Etienne lives in Southern California and continues to share his life through social media, often posting about fishing, music, and his outdoor adventures. Both Piper and Etienne have stepped away from the reality show life, choosing their own paths. Jane and Atz Lee had always allowed their children to decide whether they wanted to be on camera, and that respect for their independence remained even after the marriage ended. Despite the changes, the family stayed connected. It proved something very important. Family doesn't stop being family just because a marriage ends. Real love continues in many different forms. Jane showed that with every choice she made, always putting her kids' happiness and growth first, letting go with grace, and finding herself one of the most powerful things Jane Kilcher showed during this difficult time was that you don't need to shout to be strong. She didn't go on talk shows to blame Atz Lee. She didn't write a tell-all post about everything that went wrong. Instead, she simply moved forward. She shared her truth without dragging anyone down. She said once, "Life shaped me, but I outgrew it, and that's okay." That simple sentence said a lot. Sometimes we grow beyond the life we once dreamed of, and that's not a failure. That's growth. Jane began to speak openly about things many women understand: mental health, burnout, and the guilt of staying in a relationship that no longer brings peace. She shared stories that helped other women feel less alone, especially those who had stayed in hard marriages for the sake of their children or their public image. Jane reminded everyone that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's slow, and that's okay. She spent time with old friends, people who knew her before the cameras and the show. She laughed again. She got back on the water not because she had to, but because she loved it. She no longer tried to carry the weight of everything or everyone. She stopped apologizing for putting herself first. Jane had spent years giving everything she had to her marriage. Now, she was giving that energy to herself, and it showed. Her smile became real again, and her peace was something you could feel in her words and photos. The future, on her terms, in her power today. Jane Kilcher lives her life her own way. She's still in Alaska, close to the land she loves, and doing the things that make her feel free. While she isn't officially dating anyone, some of her posts suggest that she's open to love again. She jokes with fans, shares funny pictures, and shows that she's not bitter, she's better. The end of her marriage wasn't the end of her story. In fact, It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she chooses peace, joy, and self-love. Atz Lee, on the other hand, continues to live the rugged, off-grid lifestyle on the Kilcher homestead. He focuses on maintaining the land, raising livestock, and living in the wilderness. There is no confirmed news that he's dating anyone, either. Their lives are very different now, but that's okay. They have both chosen paths that work for them. As for their kids, they continue to grow and build their own lives. Piper and Etienne are young adults now, focused on education, friendships, and finding out who they are away from the cameras. Jane and Atz Lee always gave them that freedom, and it's paying off. The best part of Jane's story is that she never gave up. Not on herself, not on love, and not on life. She walked away from a broken relationship not with hate, but with hope. She showed that the strongest thing a person can do is choose peace over pain, and now she's happier because of it. Final thoughts. Jane's strength inspires us. Atz Lee Kilcher's story is more than a celebrity breakup. It's a story of strength, dignity, and healing. She didn't just survive a hard marriage, she came out of it stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever. Her journey shows us that it's okay to walk away when something no longer brings peace. It's okay to start over. It's okay to grow. She didn't lose herself in the process. Instead, she found a new version of herself that's even more powerful. Jane reminds us that healing takes time, and it doesn't have to look dramatic. Sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones who heal quietly, love deeply, and move forward with grace. What do you think of Jane's journey? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.